27 years, 4 months, and 23 days ago today, I walked out of the Colorado Department of Corrections. This video is part of a series to account for every single day of my adult life and every single decision and action I have ever made in that life. It was 27 years, 4 months, and 23 days ago today that I stepped out of the Colorado Department of Corrections to my awaiting mother and made the less than 45-minute trip from Canyon City, Colorado to my mother's house in Pueblo, Colorado at 1341 Cody Drive. Excuse me, Cody Avenue. That would be the first day of probably what has turned out to be the most rewarding period of my 63 plus years of living. It was decided to do this video series last year so that there was a detailed, straight from the horse's mouth, history of every single day of my life from the age of 18 years of age through the date that these videos are done. Mostly because of all of the garbage that has been published and circulated online and elsewhere over the last 18 plus years that is so far away from the truth that for anyone to actually get the truth, you need these videos. I started doing these videos last fall, and this particular video covering the period from November 18th of 1997 through the year of 2000 was skipped over because there's a lot of stuff to cover in this short period of time. So I'm going to do this one in one part, 2 chapters. First chapter we will cover from November 18th of 1997 through December 31st of 1998. And I'm going to tell you that for people who have no idea what life is like inside a correctional institution, when people make public comments about people's time in jail and them not institutionalizing well, don't take that as a bad thing. In fact, you might want to take that as probably the best thing that could ever happen. The recidivism rate in this country is absolutely through the roof. And statistics-wise, I shouldn't be sitting here making this video today. In fact, statistic-wise, I shouldn't be walking a free man 27 years, 4 months, and 23 days later. If you went by statistics, I should have been reincarcerated within the first 30 to 60 days. But that didn't happen. When I gained my freedom, Pueblo, Colorado was about to open its first Ruby Tuesdays restaurant. And that would be my first employment after my release. It would be also one of my first challenges as to how I chose to deal with the situation that not only affected me, but also affected everybody that worked with that restaurant, affected their livelihoods. What you're seeing on the screen, image-wise, are pictures from this period. Ruby Tuesdays, Pueblo Community College, pictures of people I met, became friends with, and to this day, 27 years later, I'm still close friends with. Pictures of me standing in front of my father's and my grandfather's graves in South Carolina in June of 1998. Pictures of me in a vehicle that I rented and drove to South Carolina in June of 1998 for my father's probate hearing. So let's start with, I went to work at Ruby Tuesdays, as well as enrolling in Pueblo Community College's culinary arts program, mainly because my life history was within the hotel restaurant industry pretty much. Self-taught and very well accomplished, from Marriott to Hilton to Westin, Pier 66, American Airlines Sky Chef, all of them. Waldorf Astoria in New York. What can I say? I was good at what I do. When I went to work at Ruby Tuesdays, I met Nathan and Damian Vasquez. Damian would be the gentleman to the left of your screen, center in the gray sweatshirt, sitting next to Jose in the white shirt. And then Nathan would be to the bottom of your screen, just to my left, in the black sweater, looking down, standing next to Matt Duvall, who of course is shirtless. What can I say? Matt thought that he was God's gift to women at the time. He probably was at that time. We became extremely close friends. During our employment with Ruby Tuesdays, Nathan and Damian became the targets of the general manager, Phil. Phil had this thing, even though he was married, he thought that every female employee at Ruby Tuesdays should be hanging all over him. And he was an extremely jealous individual of any employee that got the attention of the female employees that he felt he should be the one receiving. And Phil started letting his jealousy get the best of him, and eventually found reasons that he manufactured to let Damian and Nathan go. At the same time, Phil had already started to pull some illegal stuff with the restaurant. What I mean by illegal stuff is Phil was adjusting employee time cards. Basically, he was going in and taking hours off of employee time cards. He was cutting hours worked. A lot of them had no idea that he was actually doing it. I became aware of what was going on because Phil decided that for some reason he wanted me to actually work after the restaurant closed. I worked in prep. So I was working my regular shifts, but then he started having me work shifts beginning prior to the restaurant closing at night, well into the early morning, or coming in extremely early in the morning before anyone else did, and working while the restaurant was actually closed. It would be just myself and Phil. Philip tried to actually get me to accept food vouchers from the restaurant in exchange for me actually being paid on my check for hours worked, which of course I was not interested in doing. That's when I started paying attention to what Philip was doing, and that's when I realized that he was actually modifying employee time cards. What Phil did not know was that I had, from the very beginning, documented my time at work, and had been, like I said, from the beginning, by keeping a little spiral notebook with me where I would document exactly what time I clocked in, when I clocked out for breaks, lunch, etc., what time I clocked out. Because I had noticed that some overtime hours had not shown up, and I've always been a person that just maintained really good time records as far as working for someone else. It was during these night shifts that Phil had decided that he was not going to have me clock in, because of course clocking in showed corporate that he was operating the restaurant when in fact no one should be in it to begin with, but had assured me that I would be paid for my hours. Didn't quite happen that way. After Phil targeted Nathan and Damien, it really pissed me off. I was already kind of pissed off at him because he had targeted one of the other assistant managers, Nick Martinez, to the point to where he had arranged for a female employee to make a completely false harassment accusation against Nick, which got Nick terminated quite quickly. So finally, I decided I needed to do something. So I contacted Ruby Tuesday's corporate office, and I had notified them that the general manager in Pueblo was unlawfully modifying employee time cards, that he was having me work shifts during hours that the restaurant should have been completely closed, that there shouldn't have been anyone in the restaurant at all, much less working, and that he had failed to report worked hours for me alone. In fact, at the time that I made the report to Ruby Tuesdays, I was owed almost $20,000 in unpaid wages just from hours worked, based on my rate of pay, based on Colorado's overtime laws, everything. So, and I had everything documented. So of course, when corporate contacted me and I provided them with dates, times, everything. There really wasn't much they could do other than address it. They did address it. Phil was investigated. They looked into the computer data and found that everything I had reported on Phil was in fact truthful. Phil was terminated and removed from his position. I was compensated for what I was owed. However, Ruby Tuesdays had one caveat, and that caveat being that it was their position that maybe I should no longer continue my employment with the company under the circumstances, which I agreed to. I mean, it wasn't the greatest place in the world to work to begin with, but it set up a situation for me, because walking out of prison in November of 1997, I walked out with complete confidence that I was going to make it. I was going to do what it was I wanted to do and was going to succeed at no matter what it was I chose to pursue. Doing a good job, getting there. For those who have never had to start from nothing, it's not easy, but it's not something that's impossible for someone to do. My father had passed away on December 31st of 1996, a little less than a year before I got out of DOC. And his probate had been put on hold, had been continued, because I had filed a request for a hearing. Not because I was contesting his will per se, but because there were some questions about his passing that I needed answers to. Being out of prison, the probate judge in Camden, South Carolina, scheduled a hearing in June of 1998. Being on parole, I needed permission from my parole officer to make that trip, which I received. Verbally, she did not provide anything in writing, but she assured me that she knew what she was doing and that she was complying with regulations. So I had rented a car, made arrangements to travel, to be there for the hearing. When I went to South Carolina, I ended up staying with my best friend from childhood, David Dukes. Little did I know at the time that David lived almost directly across the road from where my father had passed away, where he had been living with a woman that to this day I simply cannot stand. But that's fine. I didn't go there to see her. I went there for the hearing. When I arrived, I had called my grandmother to ask if she wanted me to swing by her house and visit with her, that it was her choice. If she did not wish that I did so, I would respect that. And this was before I had been told something, and I'll get to that. But anyway, my grandmother had said, no, I think I'll see you at the hearing. Which, no problem. Well, while visiting with David's mother, I was told that my uncle Jim, had contacted her and asked her to call him and let him know if she saw me anywhere in the area, because according to David's mom, my uncle had told her that he was concerned and didn't want me anywhere around my grandmother, said that I had threatened to kill my grandmother, and that he felt that I was going to do something to her. To be clear, what my uncle had told David's mother was an absolute bull-faced lie. And it was done so because of, and we'll get to that. It was done so because of his plans now that my father had passed away. His plans as far as what he was looking to have my grandmother do in regards to property that she owned. But anyway, went to the hearing. Me being me, yes, I was bold, I was blunt. No, I wasn't playing games with my uncle or my grandmother. Said what I had to say, asked what I had to ask, and left. After the hearing, I said goodbye to David, packed the car up, and headed back to Colorado. I hadn't really stopped long enough to even let the fact that my father had passed away affect me. But as I was traveling back to Colorado, it started to. At the same time, you'll see that car phone in my hand, behind my head. At the same time, in '98, cell phones started to become more readily available. The companies were regional. The areas of service, depending on where you were at, were extremely limited, and roaming costs were outrageous. But nonetheless, I had won and had gotten that car phone. As I'm traveling back to Colorado, I get a call from my parole officer, who is demanding that I immediately return to Colorado, who is claiming that my dad's live-in, whatever she was, had claimed and called the Kershaw County Sheriff's Department, alleging that I had gone on her property, killed her dog while I was there for the hearing. Of course, none of that happened, but you have to understand, there are people in South Carolina to this day who have never liked the fact that I've just never been one of those people that they can manipulate and control and get away with talking shit about and not get confronted. But it was funny because I called David and told David what I had just been told. Kershaw County Sheriff's Department had provided information as well that there was no dog killed, despite the statements that were supposedly made to my parole officer. But anyway, I'm not worried about it. I'm on my way back to Colorado. But like I said, as I am traveling back to Pueblo, the reality that my father had passed away really started to set in. And to be honest with you, I started having thoughts about what I was doing, especially after my parole officer called and made those outrageous statements. But I started thinking, what am I doing? How is this going to work? How am I going to actually move forward? What am I going to do in life? And in that process, I had stopped in El Paso, Texas on my way back. Had gotten a room and really started to get into an extremely depressed state. It was at this time that I started thinking maybe what was best for me was not to look towards the future, but to look at how things could end. So I'm sitting on the grass. This hotel was kind of like in a square shaped with this huge courtyard, grassy area. And it was situated on a hill to where the way it was situated, you're looking down this large grassy courtyard towards the rear sections and down into the city of El Paso. I'm on the phone, extremely emotional, and suddenly I hang up. I go and get a bottle of vodka and a massive amount of Benadryl. I get back to my room, write a note that I had left for a friend, and I just start drinking Absolute and swallowing handfuls of Benadryl. When I woke up in a hospital in El Paso, Texas, where I had been transferred. It was at that time that I had been told that, according to the hotel anyway, that I had left the hotel and that when I had returned, that I was extremely intoxicated, is the way they put it. And the claim was that I had gone to the wrong room and was trying to get into the room, which apparently supposedly was occupied. And at the time that that happened, the occupant of that room, when they called to report it, that I had supposedly passed out outside that room door, and that I was transported by EMTs, and that it was at the time that police and the EMTs had responded after I was transported to the hospital. Apparently, the hotel says that they gave access to my room to local police, and that's when they determined it was a suicide attempt. But that's the story that was given. When I eventually woke up, I woke up in a section of a hospital that was a psychiatric hold wing, and it was based on an order for an eval. Didn't remember leaving the hotel ever again after coming back with the vodka and the Benadryl, but you know, that's what they said. So I'm held for about a week, I believe, and released. But during the hospital stay, I had some discomfort in a very private area of the body. And after an exam, had determined that it appeared as if someone wearing cowboy boots had literally used their foot with a boot pressed into my flesh, grinding it as if they were trying to create harm or injury. But anyway, I'm released. I am sent back to the hotel by taxi. I get to the hotel. The hotel still has my room, the stuff in my room. It still has my keys, and the car is still there. The car is parked exactly where it was parked and the way it was parked when I got back from picking up the booze and the Benadryl. So no, I didn't leave the hotel. What was clear was that the hotel definitely had gone into the room because there had been quite a bit of beer, even though I don't drink beer. There had been quite a bit of beer that had been bought and put on ice in the ice chest, among other things. And it was clear that the hotel had accessed the room and taken things because all the beer was gone. Money that was in my wallet at the time had disappeared because at the hospital reported that I was taken in with $0 in my wallet. I got my stuff out of the room, got in the car, and headed to Pueblo. Notified my parole officer, who at that time was adamant. She was irate. She was just all these threats and screams, whatever. So I traveled from El Paso, Texas to Pueblo. And just before I get to Pueblo, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to go in and let this woman try to sham me over bullshit that I know for a fact was not verified with law enforcement in South Carolina because I'd already talked to them. So some friends of mine decided that they were going to meet me at a particular exit south of Pueblo where I was going to leave the rental car and notify the rental car company where they could pick it up and pick me up to where I had a couple of days to get things in order and to be prepared for what this woman, the parole officer, was going to do. Just so I'm clear, I knew the woman even before she became my parole officer, because prior to that, she was a correctional officer in one of the facilities that I had been assigned to as well. So I spent a couple of days with some friends of mine getting everything in order. And then I went and I turned myself in at the parole office, at which time she immediately had me taken into custody and placed in the Pueblo County Jail. It was at that point that I realized that she had gotten herself in trouble and she was looking to cover her own ass by going after me. I followed the rules. I requested permission in writing to travel for the probate hearing, and she gave me permission, and I had voice messages and whatnot that proved that. She violated policy because she was supposed to actually issue that permission to travel in writing, as well as sharing a copy of it with the local authorities at the area in which I was traveling to, which she did not do. And it was discovered. So she had actually had me taken into custody, and she had actually filed for a parole revocation hearing. She was trying to revoke my parole and have me put back in jail. Because everything was documented, the hearing to determine if there was cause to actually have a parole revocation hearing, it was determined that I did not violate any conditions of parole. In fact, that any violations as to procedures or policies were in fact violated by my parole officer. And they made the determination as well that my parole officer deliberately and knowingly tried to use me as a scapegoat to cover her own ass. So my parole was not revoked. I was released, and I was reassigned another parole officer who was at the time the supervisor, who I also knew from my time in DOC. So I'm released. I'm back at my mom's house now. And everything from El Paso, the probate hearing, the efforts to violate my parole, accusing me of stuff that hadn't taken place, was still mentally stressing me out. So I tried to kill myself again in my mom's house. And I was taken to Parkview by ambulance. I was held on a psych eval. When I was medically cleared at Parkview, there was a order for a psych eval at the state hospital, which was in Pueblo, which was normal for that area. So I was transferred from Parkview to the Colorado State Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. 14, 21 days later, State Hospital issues their report, releases me, notifies the court that they find no reason and no grounds by which my being in a psychiatric facility or under psychiatric care is necessary or even authorized under the law. So I am released. I go back to my mom's just before my birthday. And Felicia and I have the same birthday. So go back. We start planning this combination birthday party at my mom's house. And it was probably what I really needed, because it was after that and during this time that I finally got over whatever it was that was stressing me from the emotional side and decided that I was going to do whatever it took to get out of my mom's house back into my own place and doing my own thing. Working and having a job had never been an issue for me. So we're in September 98. I had already left Pueblo Community College because, simply put, I was going to school full-time and I was literally working 2 jobs at the time, full-time. So we're in September 98. I'm delivering pizza for Blackjack Pizza. I'm also working at a place called Care. And what you're seeing on this screen is Colorado Alternative Residential Enterprises, Care. It's a company that provides residential care for developmentally disabled, primarily adults. I got a job working there. Really enjoyed it. I was working, like I said, I was delivering for Blackjack Pizza as well, and was working for Belmont Senior Care on the graveyard shift. It was through delivering pizza for Blackjack that I met an individual who, in all honesty, just became the love of my life. There was nothing physical, but the relationship that was established and built, most people who have spent 50 years together don't reach that type of understanding of another person, or seeing how another person is affected by things. And that individual would be Ramon. That would be the picture down in the bottom center, with the baby in front of the bottle of Jose Cuervo. What can I say? He was a young kid. Ramon was a young kid, Mexican national from Chihuahua. He was in the country legally. He was in Pueblo because he had a student visa to go to school at USC. His father, his grandfather, his aunt, his uncles lived in a small town in southern Colorado where they worked for a local rancher. Ramon literally lived there and grew up there with his father and his aunt and his grandmother. When I met Ramon, Ramon had just recently been reunited with and reconnected with his mother, who is a whole different story. But Ramon has 2 sisters who had always remained with their mother. Ramon, like I said, was with his dad and his grandparents and aunt. When I met Ramon, I saw this amazing individual who had lived such a sheltered life, who had had everything done for him, to the point to where literally this was a kid who still had not understood how to open a checking account or plan on paying your electric bills or whatever. But he was also a kid who was so desperate for friends of his own that a lot of the people around him weren't necessarily friends as much as they were leeches. Not all of them, but most of them. I started to get to know Ramon even more so after delivering pizza to the apartment over on Jerry Murphy. We became really good friends, even to the point to where the one day out of the week that I had no school and no work from any job, I had one day out of 7 that I had no work schedule or school, and I would spend it sleeping at the apartment. It was, I'm going to say before Christmas of 98, that Ramon's mother had come up from Albuquerque, and Ramon had introduced me to her at that time. And it would be that introduction that will take us into the period from January 1st of 1999 to April of 2000. That what you're going to hear, in a lot of ways, will most likely piss you off or make you ask certain questions, and that's fine. The purpose of these videos are not to try to justify anything other than to give you, straight from my mouth anyway, a complete, unedited, detailed account of every day of my adult life, including anything and everything I have ever done in my adult life, rather than you being directed and told all of this garbage. Because there's one line I always tell people: there's enough in my life that I've actually done that would give anybody opportunity or option to choose to not particularly like me or want to be around me based on actual reality, to where you don't need to go and make a whole bunch of other shit up to justify it.